Hey everybody, welcome back to our last exploration here during the season of Lent. We are moving through this season and we are almost all the way through it. So this particular time, we are looking at the story, the character of Elijah, who was broken by fear. That is the theme that goes along with him. And the main story that we are using is 1 Kings 19, 1 through 15, though his story is not limited just to that. Elijah is an Old Testament prophet. He is first introduced a couple of chapters earlier in 1 Kings 17, and he is called Elijah the Tishbite of Gilead. Let's break that down just a little bit. Tishbite is likely a clan name. We don't know a whole lot about this idea. The only times we hear this used is in reference to Elijah. So it seems to be whatever, if it is a clan name, which it kind of seems like it is, or maybe it's a community that he's from, either could be true. The only time that it shows up in the Bible is in reference to Elijah. Now, we hear that he's of Gilead. Gilead was a region on the east side of the Jordan River. It's outside of present-day Israel. It's actually part of present-day Jordan. But at the time, it was controlled by the clans of Israel, the nation of Israel. It seems to cover the area, again, on the east side of the Jordan River from roughly the Sea of Galilee in the north down to the Dead Sea in the south. So it's kind of that region that's between those two reference points on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Now, as I already mentioned, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes this area was controlled by Israel. And in the original inheritance of the Promised Land, way back in the days of Joshua, so early in the Old Testament, this area was controlled by three of the tribes, Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh. So that's kind of a little bit of a background of roughly what area Elijah was from. But he was active as a prophet of God, aka a prophet of Yahweh, one of the names of God, during the reign of King Ahab of Israel. Ahab was the king of the northern kingdom of Israel, the divided kingdom, also known as Samaria at times. He was the sixth king of the divided kingdom of Israel. So his reign is dated approximately 870 BC and lasted for about 22 years. So roughly 8.5-ish centuries before Jesus was around. Ahab was considered to be an evil king who followed I'm going to pronounce this two different ways, the Baals, or sometimes I've heard it called the Baals. This was a grouping of Canaanite gods. Not a single one. Sometimes you'll just hear Baal or Baal, but it was actually a grouping of gods. Now, some thought, at least initially, that Ahab was a follower of Yahweh, but his queen, his wife, Jezebel, was 100% not after Yahweh, a follower of Baal, and also another god called Asherah. Ahab likely abandoned Yahweh when he married Jezebel, and then he led much of the northern kingdom away from the worship of Yahweh. One of Elisha's greatest accomplishments, probably the one he's best known for, is challenging the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, which is a mountain just outside of present-day Haifa. I've talked about Haifa before. Haifa is a fairly new city in Israel. It's in the north, right along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, somewhere in Galilee. So in the northern part, Mount Carmel is just outside of present-day Haifa. 400 prophets of Baal called and danced for 24 hours in order to get their God to rain down fire and consume their sacrifice. This was a challenge that was issued by Elijah to say, hey, let's figure it out. Who's the real God here? So they go for an entire day and nothing happens. Elijah basically on his very first try, he's like, hey, God, fire, boom, fire falls down and he is successful. Now, this humiliation of the worship of the Baals is what led Jezebel to seek Elijah's life. More on that in a bit. Some other notable moments for Elisha. He was actually the first one to perform a miracle of resurrection. He brought a young boy back to life, the son of the widow at Zarephath. That's kind of a bigger story if you want to look into that one. He also, for a time, led a school of prophets, but he was abandoned, likely under political pressure, probably from Jezebel and Ahab. And he also has the distinction of not dying. But he is taken up into heaven while still alive. This happens in the second chapter of 2 Kings. Now, at this point, the title of the Lord's prophet passes to his assistant and protege, Elisha. Elisha, not to be confused with Elijah. I know their names are very, very similar there. Elijah was first and was the more powerful prophet. Elisha succeeded him and definitely inherited some of his power and some of his authority, but it's oftentimes described as he only had a measure of the spirit that Elijah had. We do hear Elijah referenced a few other times at various points of the Bible, even though he's basically gone from the picture. Most notably, and perhaps most recently in our reckoning, is at the transfiguration of Jesus, when Jesus and Peter and James and John are up the mountain and Jesus is transfigured, and Moses and Elijah show up. So he does seemingly pop up a few other places in the Bible, but mostly he's limited to this portion of 1 Kings in the first couple of chapters of 2 Kings. Sorry about that. My phone just started ringing because I forgot to silence it. Going on from there, let's get into the story that we have. Now, we're talking about Elisha being overcome by fear, and specifically fear for his life because the queen has it in for him. Jezebel wants to have him killed. So he flees from Mount Carmel in the north. This is right after the whole incident with the prophets of Baal. He flees to the south into the wilderness of the kingdom of Judah. Now, this is important because the kingdom of Judah is outside the influence and control of Ahab and Jezebel, so he might be a little bit safer there. At this point, he receives a miraculous appearance of food. More on that in just a second. And then from there travels on to Mount Oreb that is located somewhere on the Sinai Peninsula. Mount Oreb is the location where Moses received the law way back in the day, and Elijah seems to be the only other person that ever visits this area, which is interesting. But he hides in a cave, and he has himself a little pity party at this time. But during this time, he experiences a great storm, a great wind, a great earthquake, and then God shows up in the quiet, in the still, small voice. Elijah is encouraged to keep going, to continue to be faithful. And he's assured that there are others who are also faithful, that he is not the only one, even though he thinks he is. So my final thought on Elijah that I think is kind of funny. This is more of just a humorous side note, but there's a moniker of truth to it. Elijah, when he's so fearful, when he's fleeing away from Ahab and Jezebel, he's overcome by hunger, and he's tired because he's been fleeing. And he basically cries out to God, I wish I was dead. I don't want to be alive anymore. This is the worst. I want to die. And God pretty much tells him, eat something and take a nap. And when he wakes up, he feels a little bit better and he keeps on going. I think this is a good reminder for us of the importance of taking care of ourselves. Sometimes when things seem dire, it's because our physical needs are not being met and we need to remember to take care of ourselves. That's everything I have on Elijah. Hope you have a great discussion.